What if we can positively impact society by reshaping the mindsets of young men? And while we're at it, let me ask you, what does it mean to be a man? My name is Dennis Morolda, a father, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, and a principal with over 2 decades of experience shaping the minds and characters of young men across the United States. If these questions resonate, if you're a young man looking to improve your life or a parent looking for tools to help your son become the best version of himself, the Building Men podcast was created for you. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Building Men podcast. If you are a first-time listener, or welcome back. If you've been here before, my name is Dennis Morolda, your longtime happy host. I'm excited today to bring to you my guest, Justine Arsenault. Justine is a health coach, a nutritionist, a personal trainer. She runs BNA Lifestyle. And we went through the Enlifted program 1 and 2 together, right, Justine? We went through both levels together. So I met you, it's over 2 years ago now, when we first met, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's over 2 years ago. Definitely. It's over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I remember jumping on to Enlifted the first time. I interviewed Mark. I interviewed Adam Chin. I interviewed Kimberly Kesting. I had the whole host of Enlifted peeps. And they were tiptoeing into, it's a great idea for you to join this. So it would fit in well with what you're doing. I interviewed Austin Linney, who was a part of our group as well. And then you dive into this program. There's 12 or so of us going through it at the same time. And right away you recognize, all right, whoever is here, we're here because we are other people-centered. We want to do something to help others in some way, shape, or form. To learn more about our programs, including one-on-one mentorship coaching, the foundation, our Building Men online group community for young men, or to bring a Building Men experience to your school, check out our website, buildingmen.io, or click the links in the bio. Now, back to the show. But then you also recognize if you're going to do this, you have to go through the shit. You have to roll up your sleeves and dig in. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, bring me back to you, if you can jump in the DeLorean with Doc Brown and Marty McFly and Einstein the dog. Jump back in time to Justine 2.5 years ago before joining Enlifted. Who were you as a person? Talk to us a little bit about what was going on in your life that time.
I was already well on my path to working on myself. I actually knew a year before I actually took Enlifted that I was going to take Enlifted. I was waiting for the opportune time because I had already worked through stuff. I was working through my own eating issues. At the time when I first started, I had no idea that what I had was severe disordered eating. New emotional eating. So worked through that stuff, was working through with a business coach. And that's actually how I met Mark for the first time. And anybody who listens to Mark talk, you're like, what just happened? Right. So, and then, my husband ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. We moved because we're military. So like it just kept getting put back. So for me, my mental health at the time was garbage. Like that was the part for me that was keeping me stuck. And so hopped on that level 1. You are puckered, as Mark likes to call it.
Yeah.
Not quite sure what to expect. And it was awesome and awful all the same time. Like that first time you do CrossFit. It just, yeah, I remember I think it was the second class that it was like full recovery. I was useless for the rest of the day, like mentally just wrapping your head around all of the things. But before I went in, that was the last piece of my puzzle which should have been my first piece of my puzzle, was my mental health. And it was the mindset, the language, the way that I was talking to myself, the way that I was talking to the world, the way that I was viewing things. It was not in a good place. And up until we started, I struggled with anxiety disorder my whole life. Not my whole life. I was PTSD first as a child, and then anxiety disorder was diagnosed when I was a teenager. And I struggled, like it was rough. And then since I've taken Enlifted, I can honestly say that that's not the way that I would say it. I have anxiety disorder, but I do not struggle with it.
When we went through Enlifted, one of the things that's really interesting is you have to go through it before we lead people and help them get unstuck or unpuckered or work through the shit that has built up for years and years and years. You have to go through it yourself. So I remember back to that time, it was October, it was the fall of 2021 when we went through this. I remember very vividly that first time where you have to write down that story that's existing and then you have to read it out loud. And for me now, for all intents and purposes, it was a group of strangers that we were with. It was all virtual, right? And so there were we had people from South Africa. We had people from France. You're from Canada. We had, like, it was all over. We were every single time zone represented. And the first time that you read through that story, mine was about my father,
Mhm.
and I break down, and you start crying and blubbering through, and realizing it's okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
And I went through it and it didn't kill me. And then all of a sudden you slow down the story and you breathe through it and it feels a little bit different. But then you watch everyone else go through the same thing. And there's this strength in feeling vulnerable, but also being there to catch someone else as they were feeling vulnerable. So talk to us a little bit about your recollection during that time. Was it you felt very hesitant to share? Did you kind of go full force forward and you were just like, all right, I'm in this, I'm gonna do it? Like, what was your mindset going through that when you had to, like, peel back the layers of the onion a little bit?
I was fully prepared to go in, like all in. And as awkward as it is, I mean, there's still that part of your mind that's like, and especially when you hear other people's stories as well, it can give you that thought inside of your mind. You're just like, oh, well, mine's nothing compared
Yeah.
to them.
Yep.
Right. And that doesn't mean that yours is any less traumatic for you. Right. So it's like the things that you go through are your own. And that was the beautiful thing about the process is that in the end, at no point were you like, oh, that person had it way worse or that person had nothing compared to what I had. It was like, look at the shit that we've just gone through. And like we put it out there for this group of people like to be a part of. And it it is the most powerful experience I've ever been through. Like sharing on such a deep level with a group of peers. Like to go I honestly I don't even feel like I know that if I had gone through that experience by myself, it would not be nearly as beneficial as it was going through with a group of people.
Totally agree with that. And then going and having a level 2 class where you're taking the things that you've learned, all these strategies, and you shifted slightly and start looking at it more in a positive way. Like, okay, what if the good shit? What if we start listening to the corner man, the angel on our shoulder rather than the devil on our shoulder, and how that could really turn things around? And then fast forward another year or two later, getting the opportunity to meet these people in person. And so we met in October at this big Enlifted event. And it was really, I mean, just such a cool experience. You know, you meet Julie, you meet my brother Anthony, who's there. But for me, it was such a surreal thing to go through. And we did that breath work session in the evening with Brandon Powell. And I had never done anything quite like that before. So what was your recollection, or what was a high point for you actually being at that event in person?
I I remember going and being terrified and excited all the same time. And all I could think was, is this what online dating is like? Because I built this amazing relationship with these people for 2 years and
Right.
never met any of them in person. So I was going to meet them for the first time. And um the whole thing was a highlight. The most amazing part about it was that we are literally from all different walks of life. Like every demographic was represented at this place. Like, and not just like thinking color of our skin. Like when you think about like there was yoga, there was personal trainers, there was like people who work with kids, people who work with adults. Like it was everybody was on their own path doing their own thing. And I cannot imagine a place. I'm not sure where there would be a place where all of that group of people would come together and be connected in one place, right? Like it's such a beautiful thing to watch, especially when we were in that outdoor theater.
Yeah.
Like that part was really cool. I can say that the level of proudness that I was feeling watching you up on stage when you were doing your TED talk was like amazing. I was like, the guys that I were with, they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I know him. He's my friend. I've been with him since the
Yeah.
beginning."
It's funny you say that. That was, I did so much prep work. I remember getting the call from Mark, am I interested? And I got it and I didn't think twice. It was within 3 seconds, yes, I'm in. And what's next? And I remember thinking, and it was funny. I talked about it after the event. I was up on stage, me, Jen Broxman, Joel Cochran, Ryan Sprague, and Megan Henry were up on stage, and people were asking, like, what was that like? And I remember when Mark first called, I was like, yes. And then I was like, fuck, I got to do this now. And I perseverated over what I was going to talk about. He's like, talk about anything you want. I would rather him say, you have to talk about this for 15 minutes. He's like, anything. So for me, what I really struggled with, I read like 30 books and I'm like, I could switch this slightly. I could take this. And finally, I was like, I settled on growth mindset. I'm going to do something on growth mindset. And I did the whole walkthrough. And he's like, dude, he's like, if somebody wants to know about Carol Dweck, they'll fucking talk to Carol Dweck. Like, knock the shit off, talk about like something that's really passionate in your heart. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna change it slightly right here at the end. But the prep work for it, I didn't go to the yoga session that morning. Anthony and Julie, we stayed in a little Airbnb. They went to the yoga session. It was raining a little bit and they came back and they're like, they both like pulled hamstrings as they were trying to do the yoga stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like getting dialed in. And then once I was backstage, I just played it over my head. I had this whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing. I read the book. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein. Highly recommend it. And here's about memorization and how our brain works when we're trying to memorize things. And basically, what he talks about in the book, he became a memory champion where he could like memorize decks and decks of cards, and he could memorize like long sequences of numbers and all these crazy things. And he creates these memory castles in his head. And basically, what he does is he thinks about a space that he knows very well in his life. So he thought about his childhood home, right? And if you were to picture your childhood home walking up the driveway, you would remember where the mailbox was, and there was a bush over here, and what your front door looked like. And as he's trying to memorize things, he puts something that will connect to the thing he's trying to memorize, a physical thing in this space in this memory castle. So as if I'm trying to remember, pick out, I'm going to remember Derek Jeter and then a banana and then the number 6 and then whatever. I would see Derek Jeter by my mailbox, like swinging a baseball bat. And then I would walk up the driveway and I would look and actually see in my brain by the bush, by the door or whatever, there's a banana. And then I walk to the front door and there's the number 6 on the door. And you're more likely to remember these things and be able to retain them if they're associated with some memory that you have of a space in your life. Like it connects the cognitive and the spatial memory. So what I did was I studied what the inside of the bird theater would look like. I watched videos and I looked at every picture that I could possibly find. If I'm standing up on stage and I'm looking around, I'm going to see the right hand corner of the area. Then up here there was like a balcony. And as I went through my speech in my head, I knew that I would talk about my childhood. So I saw little Dennis sitting in the front row, like I pictured him. And then I looked over to the right, and this was a picture of my father. Then there was a white van, and there was a monster. And I went through the whole thing. And as like, if I watched back to the video, I looked throughout the thing and I saw those things in my mind. And that's how I was able to memorize 15 minutes without liking, knowing, or having this pause moment. So for me, I was like, once I was up there, I was dialed in. But it's funny, Julie and Anthony, after they did that thing, I was like, I'll meet you at the Bird Theater. They were so nervous. They had to go out and have like a shot and a beer before walking in. They're like, I'm freaking out, man. How am I going to get through this? And they asked me, they're like, what did you think? I'm like, I got the nerves out of the way beforehand. Once I was there, I was like, all right, let's go. put on the
Yeah.
pink pants and the Jordans and walked up on stage and started rapping.
It was
So
amazing. It was so good. It was so good.
so being in the audience there, what was, I mean, well, one, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it was cool. Just, I felt as though people were really cheering for me. It
Hmm.
never felt like someone wants you to do poorly. You know, if you're playing and we'll get into competing in athleticism, when you're playing in an away stadium, you know, the people there want you to screw up, right?
Hmm.
There, everyone wants you to do really, really well. And Mark said that. Listen, everybody here wants you to knock it out of the park. So just know that you have everyone here on your side. So I felt that. For you being in that space, what was a moment that, like, think about all the speeches. Was there like someone said something you're like, wow, this really hit home with me, or I really connected with this piece of one of the speeches?
Not necessarily one of them. It was the whole group of it. And you can feel that. And that's one of the beautiful things about the community that we're in, is that we are a group of professionals that only want to see people do good in whatever it is that they're doing. There is no negativity, right? There is no tear downs. There's only build up. It's how
Right.
can I support you? How can I help you? Right? Like it's such a great community. So when you're in there and you're listening, and I remember Meg, she got lost, right? And there was never a second in our minds, like not in my mind anyways, that it was like, what's happening? Like what's going on? Like this is garbage. You're like, you got this, right?
Yeah.
Like you know it. You got it, right? Like that cheer on that moment. And again, it was that show of every single person that was up there on the stage had a different story to tell. And every single one of them was powerful and beautiful and motivated you and moved you in a different way. Right.
Absolutely.
So it was like, it was such an amazing experience.
It really, really was. And then just seeing, like you just mentioned, seeing people that you've only known two dimensionally, where you're able to, like, you know, giving Mark England a hug and a kiss on the cheek. For me, that was like really freaking cool to be able to meet these people, you know, face to face. And like I came out of it with my cup overflowing. And
Mhm.
I basically, on the drive home, I was like, I don't ever want to forget the feeling that I had associated with this. And not only that, this is the start of something, like the stepping
Mhm.
stone. I've already done a quote unquote TEDx talk. All right, the next one. Let's go. We got this. So you mentioned like shifting gears slightly. I'd love to go back a little bit deeper, or further back in the time machine. You talked a little bit about your experience in middle school, and you talked about anxiety, and you talked about disordered eating. Um, so bring us back to who you were as a younger person, a middle school, a high school student, as you were going through difficult things in your life. You know, the anxiety, the eating issues that you were having. Talk to us a little bit about yourself at that time in your life.
So when I was 8 years old, me and my brothers were walking up the street to our home that was newly built. So it was a dirt road. Very few people lived on this street. You had 2.5 acre lots, so very far between each driveway. And we were walking our bikes up the side of the road, picking wild strawberries, and a car hit all three of us. And my older brother moved me out of the way. He stepped in the way of the car. He was hit first. The car then hit me and drug me down into the ditch. And I was then pinned beneath the car. And I remember very little. I remember saying, "Hey, Jared, look at that crazy driver." And then I remember waking up to he tried to back the car off of me, but my bike was stuck and under the wheel. I remember waking up and hearing yelling. And then I remember waking up and 6 or 7 people lifted the car off of me and they pulled me out from underneath. So I was diagnosed shortly after that, me and both my brothers, with PTSD. Went through the therapy at that age. Was like felt really good. I can remember the time that my therapist's name was Crystal. I remember that. I remember she loved elephants. And I remember the time that we went through this visualization of taking it and putting it in a box and knowing that it was there, but walking away from it. And I was able to move on. And I remember like that I was good. But then it was like middle school. high school, that beginning, you don't realize until you look back on it and see what it is. Like I had started to develop emotional eating. So, but as an active young girl who was playing hockey, I was blessed with the fact that I could eat whatever I wanted and it didn't show, right? So, but I was very much attached to food, giving me a feeling that I was avoiding or running away from, right? And when I was 15, this was when everything started to come to a head for me with anxiety. I was away at prep school playing hockey and everything felt wrong, right? And you're 15 years old, you don't know what the hell's happening
Right.
to you. You're just like, I know there's something wrong. I don't know what it is. I don't feel right. But I'm around a group of people that don't know who I am. So, and then that voice in your head starts messing with you and playing with you and feeding you lies and, you know, you're being dramatic or whatever. And it's like, none of these people know who you are. Nobody's going to really take you seriously if you tell them that there's something wrong. Like, we should really show them that there's something wrong. And so I swallowed half a bottle of pills. So ended up in the hospital getting my stomach pumped. I'm far away from home, right? Like that was that that head of everything where it was like there's something wrong, right? And it actually wasn't until a year later that I was finally diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And it got to the point where my anxiety would get so bad that if I turned my head too fast, I would almost pass out from the lightheadedness. And I was not a prior curl up in a ball anxiety. I am a fight anxiety. I will tear your head off when I am anxious. I am a very unpleasant person to be around when I struggle with anxiety, when my anxiety gets really bad. Um, so that was that, like that high school age for me. And like I played higher level hockey in high school. Um, and it was, yeah, like there was a lot of emotional eating, there was a lot of anxiety, there was a lot of so many things. When I look back on it, I was like, you did really good. Like with what knowledge you had on what was going on and the tools that you had, like you did good, right? Like, and then for me, it was, this was the kicker, was after I finished high school, I didn't go on to play university hockey. Um, and I stopped playing hockey because at the time there was no real option for girls to play hockey after that level. And nobody talks to you about what will happen to your body after you stop. So I gained 20 pounds, and there starts at 19, 18, 19, there starts the next 20 some years
Right.
of, well, not 20 years, over 15 of disordered eating, right? So, because there was knowledge on, no real knowledge on how to fuel yourself properly as an athlete, what to expect should you stop playing your sport, what to expect if you continue to play your sport, like, which is what really drove me to where I am today with what it is that I'm doing.
So I have 34 questions from that look back in time. First question is to it's Miss Crystal. Miss Crystal was the therapist or the person that you worked with. When she said, Justine, put it in a box, put it up on the shelf, and you could visit it when you want to visit it. Was that the right thing for her to do right there? Do you think that was helpful to you for her to tell you to put in the box, or do you feel developmentally as an 8-year-old would have been appropriate for you to start processing through that so it didn't manifest itself in other ways?
This was after like well over a year of therapy.
Okay.
Like this was like we had come to this point where we had worked through. And honestly, I have very few recollections. Like I remember going and doing like art therapy with her. I remember talking to her. And I verily like there's not a whole lot of clearness on exactly the words that she said. But it was visualize yourself putting this story into this box. And I don't even know if we put a lid on it.
Okay.
Right. But it was like walk away from it and watch it get smaller and smaller and smaller. Right. And I was very much visualizing myself walking away from this story or this memory that I had. And it was like, I remember feeling very good after it. Like,
Okay.
and it's not like it was the very first thing that we did. There was a lot that led
Got
up
it.
to this. And it was like, I remember thinking it was very much a,
Okay.
right. So did there need to be much more therapy that happened after that? Yes. However, that moment was,
Why
uh,
it was something that are kids at that age able to fully process through, or is it just making sure that you're keeping that connection, knowing that if they do feel that like you felt when you were 15, 16 years old, that you still have that support ready to be there for you? Is there's still that safety net? So I totally understand. I was just wondering, was it, and I appreciate you clarifying. It wasn't like, okay, here we go, Justine, we're going to talk on day one, put it in a box, put it up on the shelf. Let's talk
walk
about
away.
elephants right now. And real quick, elephants, was it an African elephant or an Asian elephant? Which was the elephant that she more associated with?
All of
I think
them,
the
both
Asian
of
elephants
them.
have the smaller ears, and the African elephants have the larger ears. If
Yes.
I'm okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's good. That's all I wanted to talk about today was really
Elephants in
quickly
their ears.
elephants and their ears. All right, so now I'm the father of three kids. I have a son and two daughters. Um, is there a difference in the way in disordered eating? And there, are you calling it disordered eating rather than eating disorder? Is there a reason there, or is it just, are they
There is a
synonymous?
difference.
Okay, let's talk to us a little bit about that.
So disordered eating is that fears of food. Like that's the simplest way to categorize it. It's so much more complex than that. Um, an eating disorder is mental. Like
Okay.
that is so far outside of my scope of practice that it takes a team of people to work with somebody who has fallen into an eating disorder. And there's really no known reason why somebody develops an eating disorder. So, like at that point, you're working with a therapist, you're working with people in like a registered dietitian who specializes in this. Like you're working with a team of people to keep you alive because eating disorders are the number one mental health killer. Like of all of the mental health disorders, eating disorders have the highest mortality rate, right? And it, it's one of those, and I'm very passionate about that because
Yeah.
like my best friend growing up had an eating disorder and relapsed again. And I was the one who had to tell. Like I was the one who, as a kid in grade 7, noticed that my best friend was wasting away to nothing when she had two fully capable parents. And I was the one who told, right? So, but the disordered eating falls under that extreme calorie counting, restrictions, fears of food, right? So anything that's under there. So for myself, let's think Weight Watchers. I do Weight Watchers for years and I loved Weight Watchers. It was great. However, you don't ever learn how to eat. You learn how to follow a point system. The majority of people, when you take the point counting away, put all of the weight back on because
Mm-hmm.
they have no idea how to eat, right? Calorie counting, in my mind, is an advanced skill. Most people need to learn how to eat first before you start counting what you're eating. It's a tool that's meant to be used as just that, just like your belt holds up your pants, right? You're not using it as a corset, like trying to like squeeze yourself, right? That's what calories is meant to do. It's meant to aid you to get to whatever goal it is that you're trying to reach. And then you have someone like me who values control. And I lost it because I was so holding on tight with the control. Like I traveled with my food scale. I struggled to go to birthday parties because somebody was going to ask me if I wanted a piece of cake, and I didn't want a piece of cake because it didn't fit within my macros. I I told myself that it was because I love control, right? And I get to control what I'm doing. But if I couldn't control it, the anxiety was overwhelming, right? It was weighing and measuring. And then what happens, because I do love food and I do love treats and I do love all of the things that I enjoy, like cookies, cake, ice cream, chips. Like I love all of those things. Pizza is my favorite food, right? And what then happened is I would binge on the weekends. So like I could eat 3 to 4 days worth of calories in one, right? And then you beat yourself up. And then you go back super hard and super strict during the week. And then you repeat the process. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you looked at me, you would have been like, damn, look at that girl. She works out. She is fit. She looks great. All of that. Inside, I was a fucking disaster. My mental health around food, around myself was so disordered. It like it was falling apart. And I always loved the gym. Not always. It wasn't until I started doing CrossFit that like I loved it, but there was starting to become guilt involved in it. That if I didn't go, right, like all the progress you're going to
Mhm.
have is going to be lost, right? Like, what are you doing? You need to get your shit together. Why are you doing this? Right? Like that inner monologue starts after you. So it was it was rough, and I did not realize that that's what was happening.
So when we think about the things that we're struggling with here now, you mentioned anorexia, you mentioned binge eating. I would assume bulimia is something that we're talking about. Just flat overeating, not even binging, just like nonstop that relationship with food. Is there, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Like, have you done any research around like what percentage of each? Like, are there more people that are dealing with anorexia? Are there more people dealing with bulimia? Like, where does that fall as far as percentage wise?
So bulimia is actually binge and purge is what bulimia falls under. I actually didn't know that till I looked it up. I just assumed that it was people who were eating and throwing up, but it's typically when you're diagnosed with bulimia, it's that you binge and then you purge, where anorexia is just the extreme restriction of calories. Um, so I, not off the top of my head, but I do remember skimming over it because I was looking more into that disordered eating
Hmm.
side of things. Um, but I want to say for young females, it's like 30 in Canada, because my statistics would be based off of Canada. It's anywhere between 30 and 40% is what I want to say for eating disorders. For young girls between the ages of like 15 and 25. Do not take my word on that. Like Google it. It's super easy to Google. Statistics come up, but it's way freaking higher than what it should be. And it's one of those things that's on the rise, and it's massively on the rise among young men, which is one of those things that we have not seen in such a long time. But disordered eating, I was looking it up, and in Canada, among young female athletes who are like dancers, cheerleaders, gymnasts, rowing, body building, like weightlifters, rowing, things where you're more visible,
Hmm.
right? The statistic is, I believe, 92 to 95% of young girls will develop some form of disordered eating in their lifetime.
So first, let me ask you. You mentioned the rise with young men. Is there anything that you might attribute that rise in the percentage of young men that are suffering?
Shitfluencers, 100%.
So dig a little bit
100%.
deeper there. What when you say that, what does that refer to? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Um, People who are on social media and using their own life as a way to scare people into thinking that they can achieve the same thing that they're having, right? Like, to me, I say anybody who's using fear around anything or guilt around anything, don't listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have I have an issue and an opportunity with people who say things like, you have no excuse, right? It's like, I can make up 40 though. Like, it's, that's not motivating me to get where I want to be. Or I watched a thing the other day where this guy was super lean, super cut, looked super great. And he's like, you want to avoid, like, you want to have a lean cut body like this? Well, when you think that you're hungry, instead of eating, take a pinch of like bouillon powder and put it in your mouth because you're likely lacking sodium in your diet. And I was like, what? What? Right? Like, there's so much where they don't talk about, like, genetically gifted is one of those things. Like, my husband's one of those people where if he decides to do a cut, meaning he cuts out 200 calories, does some sit-ups, he'll have freaking abs. He's genetically gifted that way. I am not. Right? And a lot of other people are not as well, right? And there's so much, like, or people who are saying, this is what I eat in a day, and they look really, really good. And it's like, that is not what they were eating in a day to get to that. Nor are they talking about how freaking long and how hard it was to get to that. Right. So it's that mindset piece, those little bits that we're able to skim over top of, but we're such visual beings that we see it. They're like, I want that. And they're like, oh, this is what they're doing. And then they do that and it doesn't work. And it messes you all up.
And I think
Right.
too,
And
there's a piece of it, and I think this is for boys and for girls. If you think about as we were growing up, and anyone who's listening who is a parent, the time that you were growing up, the amount of time that you spent visually seeing yourself. You look at yourself in the mirror, right? You get out of the shower, you're brushing your teeth. If you're in school when you're younger, you see yourself in the mirror in your locker, you're going to the bathroom, whatever. 10 times a day, you look at yourself 15 times a day. But kids today, I would argue, I mean, I asked my daughters about this as well, and I asked them about how many times do you see yourself in an hour, even doing Snapchat and filters and whatever. Probably 30 to 40 times an hour they're looking at themselves. And if you multiply that times they're up for 16 hours a day, it could be in the upwards of like 500 times that they're looking at themselves. And when you're doing that on a regular basis and you're seeing what a filter can do and what you're seeing from the shitfluencers and on Instagram and TikTok and whatever, and they don't feel like they're living up to this version of themselves that they want to be, now it's like, well, I'm not that, what can I do? Well, I need to binge and purge, I need to cut my calories to an extreme level, I need to work out. What I'm saying with the disordered eating or the unhealthy relationship with their physical appearance with boys, a lot of it is like overtraining, where they're going to the
mhm.
gym and they're basically starving themselves and working out so hard to get that cut look. So it's a real thing. If I'm a parent of three kids right now, I have a son and two daughters, are there any warning signs that I should look for? You mentioned to be that friend that told, to like, hey, there's something going on here. What warning signs should I look for that my kids are going through something like this?
It's a lot of it will be in the language, and that depends on how open you are with communication, how busy you are in your life. Are you noticing these things because you guys are so busy that you don't eat meals together? Right. So it's like, are you able to see these things? What are they talking about? Right. Like, how are they wording around food? Like, there's a huge, but our generation grew up with that type of talk, right? Like, don't eat that or you're going to get fat.
Yep.
It's like, you can't have that. Like, don't, haven't, won't. Like, so many negations evolved around food that um, most parents aren't noticing it because they're speaking that same way, right? And a lot of parents will speak that way to themselves and not realize how much that affects the child around them, right? You're talking about how you need to lose weight. You're talking about how you need to make changes, or are you a chronic dieter as a parent? Like, it's one of those things that it's not a bad example. That's the wrong word to use for it. But if you're looking to help your child make change, the first change that you can make is the one for yourself by leading by example, right? And but are they cutting out a food group? That's the biggest thing. I can't eat carbs. That's like, so like right now, the biggest things are carbohydrates. Like, and most people don't actually know what a carb is. So they're just like, I'm cutting out carbohydrates. You're like, okay, right? Like, are they talking about fear around sugar, fear around processed foods? Like, are they, it's all in the language, and it will revolve around restriction and fear. So, like, if you hear your child talking like that around food, there is an issue, and that issue has to be dealt with. And I will 100% throw that pressure language out there. It has to be dealt with, because if not, they will struggle for the rest of their life without proper help. They will grow up, and that disorder and that fear around food will morph into a different fear around food. It will morph into a different type of restriction. Like, if left unchecked, it can develop into something that will take years to undo.
And I believe, and it's right in line with what you're saying, Justine, is that the lessons are caught and not taught, right? It depends what your kids are seeing you do on a regular basis, your relationship with food and exercise, and how you are speaking about it as well. You know, if you decide tonight I'm going to have a couple scoops of ice cream. Oh, I'm so bad. I can't believe I'm doing this right now. Or walk into McDonald's, I'll have everything on the left side of the menu and a Diet Coke. Like, what are the kids seeing you, the habits that you're using on a regular basis? So again, putting the hat of a parent on right now, if there were one or two things, guidelines that you could recommend that we put in place as parents of kids, especially in that middle school and high school age range, what's a couple things that we could be like, these are yeses, like in general terms, and these are not so much, not, or no's in general terms? What would you categorize that could help parents help their kids?
Well, as far as like what you can do to help, it's prioritize fruits and vegetables. That's such an underrated thing. Like, we talk about it, we're not doing it. The average American gets like one serving of vegetables a day. And like, it's supposed to be 5 to 7, right? And it's 2 to 4 servings of fruit. So like, one of the best things that you can do is start incorporating fruits and vegetables into your life. Make it a part of that's the first step. The first step. The bottom of the bottom, the base of the base. It's eat more fruits and vegetables. And I'm not talking going from eating one serving of vegetables to just start eating 5 servings of vegetables in a day. I guarantee you will hate your whole life, and your stomach's going to hurt really bad. If you're eating one serving of vegetables in a day, aim for 1 to 2, right? Try to hit that consistently. And then when you're hitting it consistently, 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4, and then 4 to 5. And to me, 5 is like, I'll hit 7 if I'm eating like a stir fry. But if I'm still hungry at the end of the day, I'm looking for, did I eat enough fruits and vegetables in the day? Did I give myself all of the great, awesome things that my body needs to thrive? Or did I eat things that just make me feel good? Right? Like, we're trying to thrive here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stop surviving. Let's thrive. Right? So, and part of that is giving your body the things that it needs, all those like the vitamins, the minerals, micronutrients, like fiber, super important. So fruits and vegetables. One of the things that I also coach my son's hockey team, and one thing that I would implore parents to start changing, because it's been such a thing for years and years and years and years, is celebrations are not an excuse to eat whatever the fuck you want. When you go to a hockey game and you drink 4 or 5 beer and eat popcorn and have nachos and hot dogs and like all of the things, like when we go, it's candy, it's cotton candy, it's pop, it's all of the things that you don't normally eat, right? All at once, right? That is the definition of a binge. And we have taught our kids that at birthday parties, at celebrations, this is the time where we get to eat whatever we want because we're celebrating. Right. And it's really unhealthy. Like it really, really is. And for someone like me, and there's tons of people out there that are like me, you create that. I celebrate with food, not around food. I use it as the celebration. Right. And that can very quickly become like, I had a hard day. I deserve this. It's like, I worked really hard. I deserve this. Right. It's like, it can become a very unhealthy pattern. So, like, the basis of the basis, you want to help your kid create good, healthy habits. The three of the things that I teach the most of is eat more fruits and vegetables, drink water, and get to sleep. Like, that is the basis of the basis.
So where do you fall on the idea of fasting? I mean, it's such a buzz thing now. Everyone's fasting and taking cold plunges and whatever. Like where do you feel, where do you fall in that range? Not so much for kids, but for adults. Like where's that?
That depends on how you're using it.
Okay.
Most people, um, if you're using it in a healthy way, you're fasting because um, it's something that you're doing spiritually, right? To me, I get that. I'm okay with that. If you are fasting as you're telling yourself, and again, if you're trying to lose weight, like I fully support what it is that you're doing as long as it's being done in a healthy way. And most people who are fasting, they're restricting calories within a certain period of time, right? Is the way that it's working. So it's like, why are you doing that? Right. So it's like, are you telling yourself that that's the only way that you can do it? Is if you restrict eating, like you can't eat until 10 a.m. in the morning and you have to stop eating at 7 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock at night because you have no control over your evening snacking. And it's like, that's where we look right there. You have no control. Right. It's so many people are so dialed into the result that they're looking for that they forget to address the reason why they're there in the first place. Weight loss is a mental health game. It has very little to do with the food. If you've been struggling to lose weight, I guarantee you it has nothing to do with the food. And it's the reason why you were eating that food, the reason why you were overeating. I can tell you that since I've dealt with my mental health, I am not filling voids anymore with food. So I don't overeat. I'm not even sure I'm physically capable of that anymore. Right. But because my mental health is in a good place, and that is the key.
So if I'm listening to this and I'm struggling with my weight, and I recognize like, okay, I've tried the Weight Watchers, I've tried this, I've tried going to the gym, and I did it for a month, and then I fell off on February 2nd. Besides hiring you as their personal nutritionist and health coach, what is a strategy or two that I could start implementing right now? And by doing, whatever the strategy is, it can start getting me on the path to recovery or to living a healthier lifestyle.
The first three things that I said, fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
water, and sleep. Those are crucial for you to build a foundation that's not going to crumble. And it is a process, right? You are looking for a quick drop on the scale to say that you have done a good job. And it has to be fast or you haven't done a good job, which is entirely untrue. If you want to create change that's going to last the rest of your life, you have to be willing to take your time.
So if
It's as
I'm,
simple, it's
go
as
ahead.
simple as that.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
it's Like you've got to do it over a period of time, slow. Consistency, see, people talk about consistency. Consistency fucking sucks. It is hard. There is so much of this is garbage. I'm not getting anywhere. What is the point of this? This is so freaking boring when you're trying to build up to consistency. Once you hit consistency, you're like, oh, this is what I've been doing. This is that showing up when I don't want to show up. This is all of the boring things that I've been doing. This is what I've been working up to. Right. But it's getting to become consistent it's not a great time.
Yeah, it's hard. And the idea of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It takes a long time to get it to become smooth, but once it does, it kind of flows downhill. When I asked that question, Justine, I recognizing, okay, eating more fruits and vegetables, increasing that, without a doubt, hydration. I'm always in like whatever your body weight is in pounds, divide that by two and add 20 ounces, right? So if I weigh 220, 110 plus 20 ounces, 130 ounces of water a day, it's a non-negotiable. Like
That's
that's that.
actually a not a great fact.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
Water. You want to know the best way to judge your water is the color of your pee. If you want to know, so I was so invested in that 2 liters of water a day.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm peeing clear, which is super unhealthy. Your pee should not be clear. That means that you are overhydrated and that you're starting to lose electrolytes, which can be super dangerous for your body. So you want and then you don't want your pee to be like dark yellow,
Right.
like apple juice. That's dehydrated. You want to be in that like pale yellow lemonade color. So if you want to know if you're hydrated enough, you look at the color of your pee. If you're white or if you're clear, you need to dial it back. Right. And as far as like most people are thinking water, they're not taking into consideration all of the other things that they're drinking throughout the day. How many coffees are you having? Are you a pop drinker? So are you drinking like a bunch of different kinds of, well, as Americans would say, soda throughout the day? Right. Because the primary source, like we want it to be water. So it's like I'm not of the restrictive mindset. I'm very much the abundance, adding things in as opposed to taking things out. So if you're drinking more water, like maybe we only have 3 cups of coffee as opposed to 5. Right. But typically you're drinking those things because you actually are thirsty and you have no idea. Like you're so out of tune with being thirsty and hungry and all of that. So it's like go by the color of your pee. If you're peeing out clear, you got to dial it back because there is a lot more harm that can be done from being overhydrated than, yeah.
And I hear you. I would argue that most people are not overhydrated. Most people are way under from especially young people. If they're drinking pop, as you say, or like the energy drinks, things like that. The tricky thing is to have that like internal reminder, like, all right, I'm thirsty right now. How much water am I going to drink? Let me go take a piss and see what color is it. It's a little bit darker. I'm going to stop drinking them. Or for me, it's like having, I have like a 40-ounce water thing. I'm like, all right, like 3 of these a day that's my, but I understand what you're saying. That's not the be all end all. It can't just be like this one number metric. Like you have to hit this. It's more being in tune with your body, like understanding, okay, like it's a sliding scale more or less. And then the importance of sleep is such a huge thing. And I think as a people, as a human race, we are we are sleep deprived, especially kids, and especially the kids' habits around looking at a screen at night before they go to bed. And the first thing that they do when they wake up in the morning is to look at the screen. It's just that is such a huge piece. So if you want to start dialing in on your fitness a little bit more, it's those 3 things, like keep that in mind. But what I was getting at with the previous question, Justine, is okay, say I'm doing those things, but I'm still struggling, or I'm, regressing, or I start to do it and I stop. You mentioned the mental health piece. There's probably something that's getting in your way. So I'm overweight and I'm listening to this right now, or I need to start I get to start getting myself back in check. But recognizing that there's likely something in my way that's stopping me, something that's getting me stuck,
Mm.
that's pulling me back into my old habits. What's a step that I can take right now to start that process of addressing the barrier that's in the way of me getting into shape?
You guys can't see this because you're listening, but I'm holding up a pen. And you're going to write it down. There is a reason why you are where you are. A lot of it is likely not your fault, right? There's things that have happened in your life. There are things that you have gone through, and it's likely some hard shit, some bad stuff has happened. And food is the easiest way to feel better very quickly, right? And it's such a dangerous pattern that we can create for ourselves, right? And our brain will help us out with it as well, with that reticular activating system
Mm-hmm.
of, hey, remember when we were stressed out and the ice cream made us feel better? And you're stressed out, and all of a sudden your brain's like, ice cream, right? So it's write down where you are at and how you got to where you are. Like, really backtrack, really think about how the things that have happened in your life to lead you. Some people, when I ask them, they know for sure where their emotional eating started.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have no idea. And then when you bring back the story, they're like, oh, I never would have thought that that's where it would have started for me. But I can guarantee you that it is some form of negative thing that happened in your life, right? And if for emotional eaters, um, one of the biggest things that you can do is after you have emotionally ate, backtrack to why you emotionally ate, what triggered you, right? And then you can start as like you're in the emotional eating. Are you able to catch yourself in the emotional eating? One of the best things that you can do when you catch yourself in the emotional eating is pattern interrupt. So, as silly as it sounds, stand up and clap your hands really loud. It's ridiculous and you'll feel ridiculous, but it'll interrupt
Yeah.
the pattern of that emotional connection, right? Um, are you able to get up and walk away, right? And each step as you go along is that little tiny win to breaking the pathway that has been created with the food, right? I actually have a free course on it that you can go through. Um, I'll get you the link if people
Awesome.
want
Yeah,
it.
we'll put that in the show
Um,
notes.
but yeah, it's little things, but like write it down, figure it out. Like if it's all swirling around inside your head, it's not helping you in any way. It's like get it down on paper and really see for yourself, like where you're at and where you come from and the things that you've worked through. It's like most people do know
Right.
why they are where they are. They're avoiding it because
You
it
meant
sucks.
you mentioned, Justine, the idea of incorporating more fruits and vegetables into our diet on a regular basis. You've heard of the term superfoods before. Are there any fruits and vegetables and or other foods that you would consider to be staples that we, by adding this into our diet on a regular basis or being cognizant of getting this, over the course of a week or 2 weeks or something like that, it would really improve our health?
Uh, No, like a colorful, like think the rainbow when it comes to your fruits and your vegetables, like all colors, like in all fruit. Like people are like, oh, the sugar, shut up. No. Um, eat the fruit, eat the vegetables, right? Like any and all of them. Like find a rainbow and create it. Like how many colors of the rainbow can you eat in a week? Right? Like aim for that. Jen Brocksterman talks about it. She has like a whole cheat
Yeah.
sheet with it where it's like, how many different colors can you incorporate into your life? Um, Healthy is different for every single person, right? Like when I ask people, like they say, I just want to be healthy. It's like, what does that look like? It
Yeah.
looks different for every person. So for a lot of people, that is that first step is adding more fruits and vegetables into your life. And then you look at adding more protein into your life, depending on what it is that your goals are for yourself, right? Um, Beans and legumes are great for like your gut health, right? They've got lots of good fiber. They've got lots of other good micronutrients in them, right? So when it comes to superfoods, health foods, like no, just eat. I mean, for love of God, eat. But adding in more of the good stuff, more of that whole food, right? I am not above the processed. It's like eat what you can afford, right? Like if I'm saying fruits and vegetables and you're like, I can't afford fresh fruits and vegetables, it's like canned and frozen is still a fruit and it's still a vegetable. It still counts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's I'm not of the superfood mindset. It's like I am everything in moderation, but also making sure that I am hitting those main things: fruits, vegetables, protein, potatoes. I freaking love potatoes. They're like the best food in the entire world. Um, but yeah, like we tend to make it more complicated
Right.
than what it is. It's really quite simple. We believe that because the problem is so big that the answer needs to be big, and it's not the case.
Love it. I've learned a ton in this last hour and a hook. Really appreciate you being on. Before I get to my last question, Justine, tell us where we can find you. Tell us all the good stuff. How do we get in touch with you?
All of my socials are all connected on my website. So bnalifestyle.com, BNA. So it actually stands for Brad, Nora, and Alexander, my husband and my two kids. So bnalifestyle.com is where everything is. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, all of the things. But that's the best place to find all of my things is the website.
Awesome. And final question I always ask is, all right, people are listening, they got a ton of value from this. They learn not only taking care of themselves, but if they are a parent, what can they do to look out for things, some red flags with their kids, and how do they go about leading their family in a positive way? But they press stop, they press pause right now, and there's one thing they could only do. This one thing, by doing this one thing, it could really change where their life is going in a positive direction. What's one thing someone could do right now?
Is just do one thing. That's it. Pick one thing. Especially as parents, we tend to take our list to the extreme and then beat ourselves up over not being able to achieve that list because it was never achievable in the first place. Pick one thing. I'm going to add more fruit into our life this week. I'm going to add more vegetables into our life this week. I'm going to drink a glass of water. Right? One thing. Pick one thing. That's it. And start there.
Love it. I've asked that question 200 plus times. It's the first time I've gotten that answer. It's one of my favorite answers to that question so far. Make the one thing the one thing. Whatever the one thing is, pick the one thing and make it the one thing. It's so simplistic, but so brilliant at the same time, Justine. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast, sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge, having a couple laughs and some good times. Let's do it again in the future, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
To the Building Men audience, if you got any value from this episode, please consider liking it, reviewing it, rating it, and more than anything, sharing it out with anyone that you think might get value from the Building Men message. Justine Arsenault, it has been my pleasure. Thank you so much. Go one step further than you thought you could go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.